But why would a violent criminal risk appearing on national television?
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're looking at various examples of known killers appearing on television game shows.
So I truly believe almost every place that we live, my dad killed someone.
François Vérove. In 2019, a respectable-looking man appeared on the French quiz show Tout, monde, veut, prendre sa place, meaning everyone wants to take their place. With his suit, beard, and glasses, he looked well put together, and in a terrific bit of irony, he appeared as a community guardian, talking about his time in the Republican Guard and the National Police. This is ironic because Vérove had murdered no less than 3 people. His crime spree stretches back to 1986, when he killed a girl named Cécile Bloch as she was walking to school. Witnesses described a man covered in acne scars, leading to Vérove's nickname Le Grêlé, meaning the pockmarked man. He murdered 2 more people 11 months later, with investigators finding that he had burned them with cigarettes before killing them. While his official body count is 3, investigators believe that Vérove likely murdered 9. Police knew that the suspect was a lawman, and in 2021, a judge ordered that all police officers who worked in the area at the time of the murder submit to a DNA test. Vérove took his own life after receiving his summons and confessed in a note to have, quote, committed unforgivable acts. Paul Curry.
An unusual murder trial underway in California. Paul Curry is accused of poisoning his wife back in 1994, 20 years ago.
Jeopardy is an American institution, and in 1989, it hosted a killer named Paul Curry. Curry appeared in 3 episodes that March, winning a combined total of $24,101, about the equivalent of $63,000 today. 3 years later, he married his partner Linda Kincaid, but it wasn't long before suspicious cracks started to show in their marriage. Curry began controlling the couple's finances, and he demanded that she take out a life insurance policy worth $1 million.
And I said, Linda, are you crazy? No, you get it on both. Why, after, a few months of marriage, he's looking of a life insurance policy?
And once, when Kincaid was in the hospital for an illness, nurses found a small puncture hole in her IV bag, indicating that it had been tampered with. Kincaid ultimately died of mysterious circumstances in June 1994 at the age of 49.
Why don't you tell us about the evening where the paramedics were called out here?
Yeah.
That was June 9th.
An autopsy revealed that she had a high amount of Ambien and nicotine in her system, and the pathologist noted a small puncture wound behind her ear. Despite suspicions from Kincaid's friends and family, Curry got away with everything and moved to Kansas.
My mom thought she was having a heart attack, so she couldn't finish the day. After that memorial service, she had to go take some medication and go to bed.
But it was here that he was arrested in 2010, with investigators having finally built a solid case against him. He was found guilty of poisoning Kincaid with a fatal dose of nicotine and was sentenced to life in prison.
So 20 years later, here we are.
He's been a suspect from the beginning, too.
Lori Vallow.
I would have never thought you would have ever done something like this.
What is it that you think that I've done?
Some may have heard about the Vallow Daybell Doomsday murders, which saw the deaths of 4 people. The perpetrators were Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. But let's go back to 2004, when Vallow appeared on Wheel of Fortune.
Hi, how you doing, Lori? Lori Ryan from Austin, Texas.
That's right.
Hairstylist in Austin, hey?
That's right, the best.
How's the hair in Austin?
It's good.
Good.
Austin's a happening place.
At the time, she was working as a hairstylist in Austin, Texas, living on a large property with her husband Joseph and their 2 children, Colby and Tylee. Vallow seemed like a nice woman, and nothing appeared out of the ordinary.
I have a wonderful husband, Joseph, at home, who is watching our 2 beautiful children, Colby, who's 7, and Tylee, who is 1.
15 years later, Tylee would be dead, likely killed by her own mother. Lori and Joseph divorced in 2005, shortly after her appearance on the show, and she eventually met a religious author and cult leader named Chad Daybell. The 2 soon fell into deep religious fanaticism, with Daybell speaking of visions and Vallow proclaiming that she was a goddess who would lead the survivors of an upcoming apocalypse. They eventually conspired to murder 4 people: Tylee, Lori's estranged husband Charles Vallow, their adopted son JJ, and Daybell's wife Tammy.
Charles wrote, "She calls her own daughter a dark spirit. My throat fell in my stomach."
Prosecutors argue that the murders were committed to cover up their affair, and that the couple used fringe apocalyptic beliefs as an excuse. Vallow was sentenced to life in prison, and Daybell was sentenced to death.
It was the details of this case that were especially heinous, which is why once Chad Daybell was found guilty on all 8 counts against him, the prosecution sought the death penalty, and the jury agreed.
Edward Edwards.
My name is Ed Edwards.
And here is the extraordinary story of Ed Edwards.
To Tell the Truth was a popular game show in the 60s and 70s, and often saw the participation of larger-than-life figures. That's how Edward Edwards got on the show. 3 people would appear, each claiming to be the same person. In this case, a reformed ex-convict named Ed Edwards, who was once on the FBI's most wanted list.
Says, I, Ed Edwards, was once on the FBI's list of the 10 most wanted criminals in America. Now I am a respected citizen in my community.
4 panelists would then ask the contestants questions and try to gauge who was telling the truth. Edwards appeared on the show in 1972, about 15 years after escaping from jail and leading police on a wild manhunt while robbing gas stations. He was eventually captured in 1962 and spent 5 years in prison. He got out, reformed, became a motivational speaker, and appeared on the show. A happy ending.
When I was released from the reformatory, they looked up to me, and this motivated me to go on to bigger things, because this is why I was out there committing the crime, was for the recognition.
But that's not the end of the story. 5 years later, in 1977, Edwards murdered young Ohio couple Billy Lavaco and Judith Straub. He committed another double homicide in 1980, this time in Wisconsin. And in 1996, he murdered his foster son Danny Gleckner for insurance money. He was finally apprehended in 2009 and confessed to all 5 murders. He died in prison at the age of 77.
I said, Bill, do you know what you just did? And at that moment, I shot him and killed him. What he just did was tell her who I was.
John Cooper.
Just 3 weeks after this episode was filmed, Peter and Gwenda Dixon were shot dead on the coastal path.
In May of 1989, a man named John Cooper appeared on the British game show Bullseye, which combined darts and trivia. During the program, host Jim Bowen asked Cooper about his, quote, unusual hobby, and you can almost see Cooper's heart stop for a second.
You've got an unusual hobby, John, haven't you?
Oh, yes, the scuba diving.
The scuba diving. And apparently it's the place to do it down there, isn't it?
That's because Cooper did have an unusual hobby, and it certainly wasn't scuba diving. By 1985, Cooper had committed a number of robberies and at least 2 murders. Years earlier, he had won £90,000 in a newspaper competition, and a friend claimed that the winnings had resulted in, quote, a huge drink and gambling habit. Cooper resorted to robbery once the money started disappearing, and on December 22, 1985, he murdered Richard and Helen Thomas while burgling their Scoveston Park farmhouse.
Police believed the robber had targeted the house knowing Helen Thomas was home alone, but had been disturbed by Richard arriving and panicked.
And on June 29, 1989, just 1 month after his appearance on the show, Cooper shot and killed Peter and Gwenda Dixon as they were vacationing in Pembrokeshire, robbing Dixon of £300. He committed even more robberies, sexual assaults, and possible murders before he was finally nailed for the double homicides in 2009, thanks to advancements in DNA testing. He was clinically diagnosed as a psychopath and sentenced to life in prison.
There was a profile which effectively was like a tracing of that artist's impression.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Rodney Alcala.
Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome.
The 70s were a different time, one where a convicted sex offender could go on national TV using his real name. In 1971, Alcala was placed on the FBI's most wanted list, having evaded arrest for sexually assaulting Tali Shapiro. He had beaten Shapiro with a steel bar, and she remained in a coma for over a month. Alcala was quickly caught and spent several years in prison, after which he was paroled and appeared on the popular game show The Dating Game.
However, you did leave one remaining, and this This is your date, and I want to tell you something about him.
He successfully wooed a woman named Cheryl Bradshaw, but she refused the date after finding him, quote, creepy. Her instincts were correct. Not only was Alcala a known sex offender, he was also a murderer.
I think at first I was afraid that I was going to get lonely, being away from home, but my airline is amazing.
Can I take a picture?
By the time Alcala was apprehended in 1979, he had conclusively murdered 8 people, but possibly as many as 130. If that number is true, it would make him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history.
So I guess this means we're not really meeting up in Carmel anymore?
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere with you.
Does this footage creep you out? Let us know in the comments below.
You can go relax, meet each other, say hello, get acquainted.